We held this event just before Christmas and really was very impressed by the feedback we got from industry in the breakout groups, and it started to influence our policy and how we work. So I'm looking forward to our groups later on, but it's key for us within Teagasc and within organisations, the Food Safety Authority, to get that feedback from industry. That's something we really do need. But just to give you a very brief overview of Teagasc, again, many people think of Teagasc and they think agriculture, and indeed that is our largest remit, is an agricultural advisory. But we have a massive remit in terms of food research. So our three key sites in Ireland are based, the site I manage, which is based in Ashtown in Dublin, called the National Prepared Consumer Food Centre, which I'll speak a little bit more in a few minutes. But we also have two other sites based not too far from here, in Fermoy, County Cork, which would primarily focus on dairy. But again, within that site, we can scale up products within Moore Park Technology Limited, which is a semi-private body as well. But also a new development, BA Innovator, which some of my colleagues here from BA Column and Anita are here today, and they'd be more than happy to speak with you after this event down the back of the room here. But BA really is a game changer in terms of the next step for companies, because within Ireland we have a lack of co-manufacturing facilities which companies, startup companies and indeed SMEs can move into to develop their products. So BA really is a game changer in terms of a space, a facility, up to 20 food grade units which companies can utilise, and indeed I'd encourage you to engage with Anita and Colin at the end of this event. But just to speak to you about my own centre in Ashtown and indeed how the National Prepared Consumer Food Centre came to be, particularly out of Brexit really. So it was in response to the challenges which food companies in Ireland were presented with by Brexit, and trying to expand and export to different regions, not just the UK. And indeed PCF, Prepared Consumer Foods, is still heavily driven by exports to the UK. It's almost 70% exports in 2022. But we've seen the centre has evolved dramatically since, and again in response to COVID and reformulation, so we're continuously evolving. But really the nuts and bolts of the centre is equipment. So we are extremely lucky through the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine to get up to €10 million worth of funding for equipment. Now that equipment was driven by industry, by our technical group, and indeed all the equipment in site within our pilot plant, and it also includes analytical equipment within our labs, is to support work in reformulation. Could be analytical equipment. Indeed, Graham has touched on some of the work which they do in TUD, and we work quite closely with university as well. But really what we try and do within the centre is join research and industry together and translate some of that research into practical work that then can be adapted by the industry. So again, and indeed, if any of you here want to engage with me, you're more than welcome to come have a tour of the centre. It's based in Teagasc in Ashtown. And the centre, how we structured it at the start in 2018 was based on 5 key pillars. And the reason I've included this slide is these 5 key pillars really translate into reformulation. So if you take them individually, nutritional analysis and quality, you need to set a baseline for your nutritional products. Indeed, whether that's done through analytical means, but what salt content, what fat content is in your product to begin with. But really, you can't begin your reformulation journey until you know that baseline to begin with. And indeed, you move forward then into food innovation, food product development. A lot of product development we do on reformulation products, there could be 2-3 weeks work teasing out, well, what are our targets? What are we going to do before we even walk into a kitchen, before we even walk into a pilot plant? So it's very important to establish what are our targets here. And again, they can change, like any R&D project, they can change over time. But you really need to establish what you're trying to achieve from the start. And indeed, we take in then our honour site, so advanced processing technology. Just give you a quick example of a client we worked with recently to reduce salt. And that then developed into a project where we ended up using a technology called high pressure processing. It's a tolling facility in Dublin where you can send your product for high pressure processing. And as a result, they want to achieve the same shelf life with salt reduction. We actually ended up doubling the shelf life as a result of using more advanced technology. So that's something we're very open engagement with companies on as well. And again, sensory, Graham touched on there, sensory, sometimes a forgotten science, but key in reformulation. Sensory science. What will your end consumer think of your product? And how is sensory done? Is it in-house? Again, I've been privy to mistakes even in former roles of, is it a team gathered around the table and they're heavily influenced by one another? And again, most companies, you're quite close to your products. So you will detect changes, and sometimes you're probably not the best people to taste the product. It could be a consumer or consumer group that you need to bring in. And I suppose key underpinning everything, food safety and shelf life. As Graham's touched on, reformulated product does change its shelf life, does change its structure, chemical composition. So it's really key that any work is underpinned by food safety. And again, just to go through the key target areas, maintaining product taste. Again, it is difficult to us to maintain the taste of a product when it's reformulated, but change isn't necessarily always a bad thing. Change can improve a product. But I think as consumers, in particular Irish consumers, we're not, I suppose we don't like change. And again, and sometimes the media can highlight this in products, as you'll see I always use the example of your tin of roses at Christmas that seems to be shrinking every year, and that can be highlighted sometimes. But just taking an example for products, change might necessarily be a bad thing, but it's how we present that change to the consumers, how we present it even internally to our own company. I'll give you a very quick example. I was working with a client a number of weeks ago, and we're in the development kitchen. And as you'll all know here, when you're developing a product, you spend most of the day cleaning instead of actually developing. But a member of staff was helping me just clean at the end of the day. And one thing said, what are you doing? So we're trying to help reduce sugar in the product. And the looks, you're trying to damage the product. Said, no, and when I explained to them and talked to them actually through what the reformulation task force, what they're doing, the realization came to we're actually trying to help, we're trying to improve. So sometimes communication is really key in the formulation journey. But again, I suppose the two key things are price and consumer acceptability. So can you maintain the same price in the product, and ultimately will the consumer accept the product at the end of the day? And that's key where sensory and all other aspects on the formulation journey really come into play. Again, I've touched on a lot of this, but just it's awareness. Where do we start? How do you start? Who do you go to? And again, it could be Graham or it could be Teagasc, but there are so many supports available in Ireland. Again, Nuala and her team, don't be afraid to reach out when you start your journey. And that's really our remit, is to support Irish food business. So there's a range of supports. Enterprise Ireland Board, be it several supports throughout Ireland that can really help. And again, establish that baseline. So what are we actually trying to do? Set that from the start and work towards it. And time frame. Reformulation can take time. So set that journey. Gather your team together. Again, we're very dependent on raw materials, ingredients. And sometimes when reformulation, those ingredients can be difficult to source. But I would really encourage engage with your current suppliers and establish prices very early, minimum order quantities very early in the reformulation journey. And involve all staff. Because you will need, one recent project we worked on almost fell down at production level. We changed the viscosity of the product, and that in turn then made the product more difficult to deposit on a production line and slow down production. So there's several different parts at play when we formulate a product. Again, I'm just going to briefly talk through the three categories. I won't make reference to any particular project due to confidentiality, but really ask the questions with salt. Why is salt there? Is it for flavour? Again, in meat, the reasons why salt might be included in a cooked meat product are very different to a confectionery product. So really ask those questions. Why is salt there? Is it for colour enhancement, stabilisation? Again, salt has been used for thousands of years, but why is it within your product? And establish that very early in the play. Small changes, the particle size in salt can make a massive difference. Sugar, the same. Why is it there? Is it for sweetness? Is it for texture? Is it for the structure? Is it there for shelf life? Because historically, a lot of food products would have had sugar added and salt for shelf life to help bring down the water activity and increase the shelf life. The addition of sweeteners, we've worked with a lot of ingredient suppliers on new sweetener I suppose options. But always be aware of, are there, with sugar alcohols in particular, will you need to make reference on packed polyols and their effects. So there is excellent products out there, but it's just establishing area on what can you use, or from a marketing perspective, what do you need to use. And again, the same with fat, texture, mouthfeel. But again, we've seen over the last number of years, and even some products we developed to try and replicate that texture and mouthfeel. Those products do now exist. So it's really asking the question, are there alternative fats we can use? And on shelf life in particular, oxidation. That's a key factor in terms of fats. Will oxidation occur within the product? So really just to sum up, as I mentioned, engage right across the board with not just internally, but with other organisations on your formulation journey. One honour point I will make is many companies now are focused on reformulation, but they're also focused on sustainability. And we've seen this with a number of companies where they're changing their current packaging formats and perhaps reducing the shelf life of the product. Join that thinking together. And again, I know most companies here are looking at more sustainable options in terms of packaging, but something to consider in your reformulation journey as well. And again, set realistic timelines, engage with retailers, engage with customers, engage internally, because reformulation does take time, ultimately. So, thanks very much.